Well, good day and welcome to Coffee Chat. I'm your host, Jim Cockburn, and it's a pleasure today for me to have as my guest Pastor Vlad. But Pastor Vlad is going to explain his whole name, and I apologize to him for not utilizing it, but you'll find out why. And he's asked me to call him Pastor Vlad. So we're going to be discussing with him. He's relatively new to the Nipawin area, and that's part of the reason for the interview is to introduce him to you. First off, sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm just honored and privileged. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you, and let me say, welcome to Nipawin.
Thank you so much. It's a nice community, we can tell.
I guess the first question, Pastor Vlad, is that you've asked me to call you Vlad. Now, let's talk about the name. Give it to me as it is on your birth certificate.
Okay, on my birth certificate, it's spelled there Volodymyr, which is the Ukrainian way of saying Vladimir. And such a name has many syllables. Therefore, my Canadian friends just easily ended up just by calling me Vlad, just one syllable. Very short word.
Excellent. So you were born where?
I was born in the Soviet Ukraine in 1971. Ukraine in those days was a part of the Soviet Union, big country. And so, yeah, and spent probably the first 20 years of my life in the USSR until 1991 when it collapsed or disintegrated into 15 independent countries.
So at this moment, let's introduce your wife also. Give us her name and where she's from.
Okay, my wife's name is Larissa, but again, our Canadian friends call her Laura. So she was born in 1976, and we met at the Teachers Training College in our home city in Ukraine, and that's where we got married, and we've been married for 25 years.
Excellent. We'll talk about the children a little later on in the show, Vlad, if that's okay.
Sure.
Pastor, let me ask you, part of the rationale in your wanting to stay in the Ukraine was because did you have a dream that you wished to fulfill? Were you following in footsteps? Had you made a decision as to where you wanted to go with your life? Kind of enlighten me on that.
We became the first evangelical Christians in our family clans in 1999. And back then, I probably never dreamt or had any plans to leave Ukraine. But I became the Baptist church pastor in 2011. And in those days, one family after another from many churches in Ukraine began immigrating to Canada, US, some European countries. And one family ended up in Swan Valley, Manitoba, from our church. At that time, the church was looking for a pastor. It's a small rural community church up there north. And so our Ukrainian immigrants, our friends, told them that we have one of the associate pastors who is fluent in English. We think that he can preach in English. You can try inviting him over as a candidate. And that's how I came first to Swan Valley, Manitoba without my family in November of 2012. It was already very cold and very dark.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. Were you of a different denomination prior to turning to Baptist?
Yes. Nominally, I would say it's almost like by birth. Most Slavic people, Ukrainians, Russians, Belarusians, they kind of associated with the Orthodox Church or Greek Orthodox Church. But I was not baptized according to that Orthodox rite. I was baptized when I was 28 years old in the Baptist Church. But yeah, most traditionally Ukrainians are either Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or Roman Catholics. Very few Ukrainian believers just go to evangelical or Protestant churches. Still, most go to Orthodox ones.
Okay. Did they have a Baptist movement in Ukraine while you were there?
Yes, yes.
So you left the Greek Orthodox, I'm assuming then, and went to
the Baptist Church. But in my case, my Ukrainian Orthodoxy was very, very nominal.
Yes.
I attended, say, an Orthodox church in our home city in Ukraine twice a year, around on Christmas and on Easter time, maybe twice a year. Then the rest of the year, I lived like the world, like in all kinds of sins and stuff like that. It was very, very nominal, like no faith. It was just a cultural thing.
Okay. What made you decide on a personal level that you wanted to switch to the Baptist?
It was a heavy family loss, a tragedy. When I started seeking, looking for a sense of life, all of a sudden, 3 weeks prior to my wedding, I lost my only sibling, my younger brother. He was the second-year student. He was hoping to become a lawyer someday, but he died just before my wedding. He was only almost 20 years old, and that family tragedy shook me up, kind of turned my worldview upside down. And I remember clearly the moment I was sitting by the coffin where the body of my only brother was there, and I began asking myself, what would happen to me if I died all of a sudden, if my body is in that wooden box? Where would my soul, if there is a soul, go? Heaven or hell? I remember clearly that moment. And after the funeral, my wife and I, my future wife, or soon to be a wife, we began attending different evangelical churches in our home city of Cherkasy. It's in the central part of Ukraine. And we probably attended all kinds of denominations, all kinds of churches, before we finally ended up attending a Baptist church in downtown area. And we really were welcomed, embraced by that community of believers. They had a good pastor, very loving man, and very encouraging congregation. Yeah, that was very nice.
I'm sorry for the loss of your brother. But I have to ask too, you said you went to so many churches, that different denominations. I guess somebody had to have an impression upon you for you to make that decision that that's the place where I want to go worship.
Okay. The first thing we noticed, if the Bible is preached in a contemporary modern Ukrainian language, that's the way to go. You can understand the message. In the Orthodox churches, it was either old Slavonic language, like many rites, many rituals, and I had no idea how many icons I was expected to worship and kiss. I was totally messed up. So it's preaching in your own language, down-to-earth preaching, applicable, practical kind of preaching, and kind of living worship style when people were singing hymns in Ukrainian and Russian languages. And again, we could join, we could understand. So it's when your heart and your mind are switched on, when you understand, and that's where your heart kind of belongs to. If you don't understand, if it's not really meaningful to you, it's all kind of tradition. It can be a beautiful building with nice windows and icons and everything and statues. But if you do not understand why you're there, so it's kind of...
I can appreciate what you're saying. So then, help me out here a little bit. Were you employed in a business other than as a minister, a pastor?
Yes. After graduation from the teacher training college in the city of Cherkasy, Ukraine, I worked for 2 years. I was teaching English at a business college. And then I taught Ukrainian and Russian languages to American Peace Corps volunteers. And then I went to seminary. That's where I kind of decided to change my career. And as I was studying at seminary, I was ordained to be a minister, to be a Baptist pastor. Yeah, I taught at a business college for 2.5 years. And in the Peace Corps, I only worked for 4 months. It was just one big group of Americans who came to our area. And I did some translation work. I was an interpreter for mostly different missionaries, but sometimes for secular businesses as well.
There were times when interpreters were paid coin for the job that they did. Did that happen to you?
Yes.
Or was it strictly a volunteer position?
No, they paid us. Originally, they started paying us, I remember those days, probably $7 per day. Like, since your early wake up, you were expected to work until late at night for $7 a day. But it was still good for an average college student way back in Ukraine. Sometimes you did it voluntarily, but mostly they tried to pay us because they realized it's your time, you're away from home, especially if you travel, things like that.
Okay. So you were ordained over in the Ukraine as a Baptist pastor.
Yes.
Did you get a call from friends that had immigrated to Canada?
Yes.
In the Swan River area, or were they elsewhere within Canada?
They were in Swan River. They spent a few months there, but then they moved down to Steinbach, southern Manitoba. but they still had friends in Swan Valley.
Yes.
And those, I think they were German immigrants. Some of them were deacons at that time of that church. They phoned us while we were in Ukraine. And I remember it was a midnight call. It's time
Yes,
difference.
yeah.
It was like, are you still interested? Would you like to come and just to be the candidate? Okay, I will come, but for how long? Almost for a month without a family. That was an experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you said you would go and you committed,
Hmm.
you'd never been overseas before?
Oh, I've been many times to the States.
Oh, to the States.
To the States.
Okay, so then the transition of coming to Canada wasn't as great as it would have been the first time then that you left the country.
It was, yeah, it's an interesting question. But we got some experience in international travels as a family. And so it was not really scary. We were nervous to move your family from one place to another. And all our relatives are still there in Ukraine. Like here, we're first generation immigrants, like many residents of Nipoa. And so I think we're kind of feeling at home here because we're not the only immigrants. So there are quite a few, yeah.
When you came, did you come by yourself first to scout it out, or did you move the whole family?
I came first as a candidate by myself,
Okay.
and then it took almost like a year, the paperwork,
Right.
for us to move to come as a family.
Okay, all right. So you went to Swan River, and how was your first day on the pulpit?
It was November 17th of 2013. I still clearly remember the day. Like the church folks invited some friends, some neighbors. They had kind of more people than their regular attendance. And after that, we had a traditional rural community potluck lunch. That was great. The food was delicious. And I'm sure that 99.9 or 100% of Nipoa residents, you are missing those days where we could have potlucks, where everybody came to share his gift, his special meal, special dessert. We all are missing those days. Oh boy.
So you spent how many years in Swan
It's
River?
almost 7 years.
Okay. Now, when we talk about your family coming over, your wife came. Did you have children back in the Ukraine with
Yes.
to come also?
That's a little bit funny, dear friends. In Ukraine, we had 3 girls. And then once we moved to Canada, the Lord God surprised us with 2 boys. And they were both born in Dauphin because we could not have kids in Swan River. It was adventurous to drive my wife in a van at 1 a.m. And it was dark. And, if you drive between Swan and Dauphin at nighttime, you'll see much more wildlife than people or traffic. So that was an experience. So in Canada, yeah, we got 2 boys, 2 sons. Right now, they are 4 and 2-year-olds. Yeah.
Well, and growing up in Swan River, a bit of a, how do I best put it, a bit of a Western town, rodeo culture.
Yeah.
Did that take a little bit of adjusting to?
Yeah. Actually, that was so nice. It was so cool to see the rodeo and just to be a part of that big community event. Again, I'm sure all local people are missing those community events because it's just an integral part of our community life. It's like a family. When we're all together and we're celebrating, we're involved. We're not just sitting at home locked up just behind our windows. It's different. I'm sure everybody's missing that part of life.
Oh, I can attest to that for certain. Let's talk about the weather. The Ukraine, I'm familiar with, they have the seasons, but I don't know how the snowfall is over there. Is it comparable to what we would have got here in Canada, or are we a little more advantaged getting more snow here?
Oh, if we compare the climates, Ukrainian climate is perfect. It's an ideal country for farming because Ukraine is blessed with a thick, black, fertile soil. It's very good for farming, and the seasons are quite different. Ukrainian spring starts in the middle of March. Sometimes there's no snow in February, and it stays like that, no snow. And the farming season is much longer. And so the fall season lasts until December or mid of December, sometimes until Christmas. It's warmer. And Ukrainian winter is usually the calendar 3 months, if not shorter these days. So it's warmer. It's warmer. Ukrainian summers are hot. They're longer than Manitoban ones.
Okay.
And 30, 35, 40 Celsius sometimes can be a norm, and it can stay for a week or 2. Yeah, it's hot.
So the only adjustment really you had to make was clothing.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. Especially winter clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, winter, yeah, for sure it's different. You cannot walk a mile or two when it's 30 below here outside.
So how did your kids react to it?
They were kind of excited when we decided to move, and they really enjoyed, and they are enjoying their Canadian life. I'm sure if you ask my girls and even my boys, would they ever like to be back? I mean, for them, for the boys, Ukraine is somewhere on the map. They only talk to their grandparents via Skype and other social media. But for them, this is their homeland. They have friends. They like their teachers. They like, say, the church folks. And so that's their life. Kids are where, like the place where their parents are, usually.
Certainly,
Not always, but
certainly.
yeah, but
So life in Swan River was good.
yeah, it was good. It was really good.
So my next question then says, you came from Swan River to Neepawa. Was there a reason?
I applied to this church pastoral vacancy, and the church, to my limited knowledge, has not had a pastor probably for 2 years. They had an intern pastor, but they were looking for somebody kind of to move and be the pastor on more or less permanent basis. And so I applied, and I remember clearly I received one phone call, then another phone call. I came and had a meeting with a search committee, and it went well. I really enjoyed the church folks, the deacons, and the church leadership. Very nice, very gracious people. So, and we moved a month ago. We moved, I think, on September 5th, if my memory serves me right.
Mm-hmm. So when you got here and you saw the First Baptist Church, it's a fresh building, a new building.
Oh yeah, nice building. Yeah.
It probably, you probably thought, oh, this is very good. This is a great place.
Yes, in that sense, but the church is not a building. In fact, according to the scripture, to the Bible, the church, ecclesia, is a gathering, physical gathering of believers in Jesus Christ. And whenever people get together in somebody's home, outside, in the park, in the wood, in the church building, they are the church if they share common faith. But it's an asset to have a building because you can have more activities, especially indoors in wintertime, things like that. But the church is where God's people are.
So you've adapted to Neepawa, the family's settled in?
Yep. So far, we're still looking for a place to buy eventually someday, because you cannot rent forever. It's just pretty cool. And the boys, they're missing the space of the rural countryside. They want to see tractors and combines on the fields. So if we can find something outside of town, it would be even better.
Okay. So when you took your first sermon in Neepawa, when you stood in front of your congregation, what went through your mind?
I sensed that if you're a Christian minister, wherever you go, if you see other children of God, you're home. Because it's a universal God's family, the church. You can go to any country, to any culture, and you can find God's people there. But on the other hand, different faces, but still welcoming faces, kind of friendly faces. I really sensed that why not? It can be another family, church family for us. And so far, we're here and we're happy, we're blessed to be a part of that church family.
No disrespect to the individual that was taking the services prior to your arrival, but I'm sure your congregation now feels comfortable. They can have somebody to say, he's ours.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah.
He's arrived.
He's arrived, he is ours. We can reach him, we can call, we can meet, we can email. He's there in the church office in the morning hours. Yeah, that's a neat experience, because like whether it's a church, whether it's a business, it's good to have somebody whom you can talk, whom you can meet and discuss anything in life. Yeah.
I always ask this question when I have the opportunity to sit down with church pastors, ministers, reverends, priests, and I say to them, you've written many, many, many sermons in your lifetime. The question is, have you utilized a sermon from before that you would go through a second time?
Oh yes, quite a few times. And to be honest, friends, there's always room for us to grow. I recently kind of looked at my sermon notes when I preached through the first epistle of John, maybe from several years ago, and I took a look at it. How poorly I could preach back then. I think I can do better. You always can go back if you dig deeper into God's Word, if you spend more time in prayer asking for God's help, and if you use some different resources nowadays. If you do not speak biblical Aramaic, Hebrew, or Greek, you need some resources to help you to make up a good sermon. Yes, you can always go back, and it's a very humiliating experience. You see your drawbacks, you see your weaknesses. If you look retrospectively at your sermons, and you can see that you can do better. You can develop into something better.
So have you had the experience of performing your first wedding in town?
Not yet. We just moved. I performed a wedding in Swan River in Swan Valley, but not here because after a month, nobody approached me yet to perform a wedding. But I think I hold the Manitoba marriage license. It's still there on the shelf somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure you will be approached.
I hope so. There are still so many young people, and it's
Yes.
encouraging to see kids and some teens that are growing up. Eventually, if they stick around, we'll have lots of weddings in this town.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
The mosaic of your church is made up of different denominational people.
Maybe, and definitely different ethnic backgrounds.
Yes.
We have some Filipino folks. We are the only Ukrainian family so far. I would say still a big chunk of our people are born and grown Canadians, so it's good. People from different professional backgrounds, that's good. It's a good mix. It's a good mix.
Good. Do you have programming within your church that you talk about the difference of ages, like when you talk about a 7-year-old that is still involved in a Sunday school format?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have something there for a 15, 16-year-old?
15, 16-year-olds, I'm not ready to answer this question. We used, before this pandemic got started, we used to have the youth group, Sunday
Okay.
school for children, Sunday school for adults, but in the summer months it's been slowed down. I think we're planning to restart our Sunday school for children and eventually a youth program and youth meetings for sure, because it's been so long, it's been kind of quiet due to this ongoing thing in the province and in the country and in the world. Yes.
And the reason I ask that question, Pastor, is because I've talked to a few of the youth, and they always enlighten me to the fact that they miss the void.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like you're step by step by step, and all of a sudden, one step needs repair.
Yes.
So it doesn't get done for 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
There's a void there.
Yes, I totally agree. And you know what I noticed, to be honest, so often the youth groups are for kids or teens, say between 13 and 18 years old. How about those who are 19 or 20 years old? And if they're still singles, no families, they need some kind of fellowship. They need to have good, solid friends. They need to meet on a regular basis. Otherwise, people, they can be really lonely. They miss something if they do not meet with their friends on a regular basis. There should be something even between 18 and 30 for singles. And for young couples, for young married couples, we need each other. The thing is that God Creator has made us to be sociable beings. Yes, some people like isolation. Yes, some people like living somewhere surrounded by wild animals than human beings, but most people prefer having a friendly chat over a cup of coffee, sharing the joys of life, crying over somebody's shoulder, sharing griefs and sorrows. We need people, other people. We cannot live in a room by ourselves in front of the computer screen. People are much more fun to be around than computer screen.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because in this day and age, that seems to be one of the hurdles that even parents will talk amongst each other, that how do I get my child off the sofa and sitting there texting to get involved in something more material?
Yeah, the problem is it has already become such an addiction. Smartphones, social media, it's a pretty bad addiction. And like most of our folks, maybe not all, have heard such a term, fast or fasting. That's when people stay away from food or even drinks for a short or long period of time. I can't imagine if our community will announce next week 1 week without social media. How many people will survive that kind of fast? Or 1 day without your smartphone, 1 day or 2 or 3. It's an addiction. It's much worse than drugs and alcohol. Addiction to social media and smartphone, it's just horrible. It just...
Well, it's a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, though, it's taking away from any of them utilizing their God-given brain for utilization for betterment in an environment where they get to think for themselves,
Yeah.
to react accordingly.
Yes. Amen to that, to your statement, because as human beings, we need to turn on our critical thinking. God has given us ability to think, process all incoming and outcoming information, and it's a gift. Use it. Do not believe what you read on social media 100%. Hear the second opinion, the third opinion. Read something else. Read something in another language if you can, even if it's only in English, but try to find different sources of information, because otherwise you'll be really brainwashed. You will lose your opportunity, your capability of thinking independently. But we're all different, we're all unique, we're all special. We need each other because we're different. We cannot be just the same kind of personality, no personality kind of a mob of people.
It's interesting you bring that point up, because I always say, even in the medical profession, get a second opinion if you so choose, and feel free to get it.
Yes, yes.
So it's interesting.
Yes.
Probably my last question, maybe second last question, as the Catholics have the Pope, and as the United Church Anglicans have the Archbishop, who does the Baptist have as their person whom is in charge, as they say, the top dog? Excuse my expression.
No, that's okay. Baptists as a denomination historically have held a view that we are pretty much autonomous as congregations. Yes, we have the regional minister who lives somewhere near Winnipeg. He comes and visits, but he does not have an authoritative power to dictate, to tell the local autonomous congregation what to do. And that's a huge blessing, that the local congregation is in charge, not a bishop, not a pope of any kind, that as a family of believers, we're pretty much autonomous to make important decisions. Those regional ministers, they serve as a source of help, encouragement, some kind of prayer support, whatever, but they do not decide for us. So we decide as a family on our own what to do.
Interesting. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Are you responsible to a board of governors?
Yes,
or
definitely.
A board, church board?
Yes,
Okay.
church board. And we should not be afraid of being responsible.
No.
Because it's a team play. You're never on your own, and we need each other. I need their support. They need me. I need them. We're all together. Yes, deacons and the church council. Yeah, it has to be done this way because it's a collective work. It's a ministry of different people together.
Pastor Vlad, I want you to know that I appreciate what you've brought forward here today. I've learned something, and I always like to be able to walk away from an interview having known that I have learned something, and I thank you for that, sir.
You're very welcome. And if you can, on Sundays at 10:30, we're there. You're very welcome to come to our church, and we would love to have you. And may God bless our community. And pray. Don't be embarrassed to pray to God and ask Him to stop this virus, to stop this pandemic thing, because often we forget. We trust, we believe so much in science and medical data, but we forget that eventually every breath in your chest, every heartbeat is controlled by God Creator, not by your pill, not by your medication, but by Him, because He's given us life.
Thank you. On that
You're
note,
welcome.
we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I would like to say thank you to Pastor Vlad, and the insight that he's brought to us on the First Baptist Church here in Nipawa. And again, we welcome you and your family, sir, to Nipawa. My name has been Jim Cockburn. It's been a pleasure. If you can't put a song in your heart, please put a smile on your face. Have a great day.